Ochelli Effect is sponsored by WallStreetWindow.com and listeners like you.
And now, the most underrated voice in all media, Chuck Ochelli.
Looks like it's April 16th of 2024, allegedly, according to that thing we call a calendar. This, the Ochelli Effect, and you probably not listening to it live, but I am broadcasting live. And we are also podcast afterwards on your various podcatchers du jour. So it is what it is. It was what it was, and it's going to be what it's going to be. I've had a lot of difficulties over the past couple of weeks trying to get steady live shows out. I've invited people who didn't show up. I had other issues, internet issues. It just seemed like the universe was conspiring against me, except somehow I made it for Friday nights and was able to do the open call-in shows. Anyway, I invited two friends to join me tonight, and if you're a regular listener or a longtime listener of the show, you'll know who these guys are. But let's get to it. Regular Joe is with me. Why do I call him Regular Joe? Well, because he's pretty regular. He's a regular guy. And usually somehow with a completely different accent shares very similar opinions to my own, except that he disconnects from the news more often than I do. And who else do we have with us? Captain Trips, the guy that I have talked about because he does work in the medical industry, and we don't discuss exactly what he does usually, although I think it's been brought up a few times. And whenever we want to discuss medical stuff, there's my consultant, there's my friend, because he's got sanity when it comes to this. He's not just a regularly programmed doctor who shows up and says, stick to the schedule, you need to be on the schedule, and you must do what you're told because this is what the AMA told me to do, and all that kind of good stuff. Anyway, probably the only medical professional who I actually trust on the show, and one of the guys that I really wish I could hang out with, except he lives in Kentucky. So let's start in Kentucky, where there was a storm that blew through recently, but I don't know if it touched him. Regular Joe, how you doing, man?
Oh, it's same old, regular as can be. But no, I didn't get hit with any storms. This place is kind of a geographical oddity, a meteorological oddity, as it were. It seems like any bad storms that roll through, they kind of dissipate to the west of me and then regain strength to the east of me.
Ah, okay. Yeah, you got to be careful with those multi-syllabic phrases because they get a little trippy. Yeah. Meteorological. Wow.
Thank you.
Hey, look, that's tough for a guy from Jersey, too, so don't worry about it. But no problems there. But I did see storms in Kentucky. I saw Bashir was in the news. But we're not going to pay attention to too much of the news. I do want to talk about the global condition, which unfortunately is going to have us touch on news before we're done. But let's also say hi to Captain Trips. How you doing tonight, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. Gentlemen. We had a nice run of storms coming through here last week. One of my colleagues had a tornado touchdown in our backyard.
Hey, look, we all know, we have known when you've called in or been part of the show that you now reside in what you call DeSantistan in Florida there.
I do.
Quick question. Were you anywhere near this horrendous, seems like sheriff's deputies are involved in the shooting, carjacking, and then burning up of a car and a woman in Florida over the weekend? Or
No, I think that was...
That's not in your neighborhood.
No, it's not. Okay. I saw... hold on, let me look. Because I saw a quick piece on this story. It wasn't around me. I'm trying to... Yes. This was a Hispanic woman, correct? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. Homestead. No, this was. Homestead. No, this is South Florida. South Florida, kind of inland. I don't know if y'all remember Hurricane Andrew, but that's where. That's Seminole County. So, yeah, we're down by the Everglades.
Well, I have noticed that since you've been down there, you're using words like y'all now a little more often. So I know that things are affecting you. But I always ask everybody when they're local to something, or at least it's in their state, if they're anywhere nearby, because it usually provides a different perspective. I'm asking Joe about, storms and tornadoes and hurricanes. I'm asking you about carjackings. But this has no reflection on Kentucky or Florida per se, because after all, people think that nobody has guns in California, but apparently they do, because over the weekend there was a 3-hour shooting spree in, what is that, Marita Del Rey. In an apartment complex. This guy went berserk with all kinds of automatic weapons and was shooting up a whole complex for 3 hours in California. So, things happen.
I missed that one.
Yeah, gun control states. Well, just because there's gun control in the state doesn't mean that somebody doesn't get a hold of a weapon and go crazy. So I don't know.
Come on now, look how safe Chicago is, man.
Well, yeah, there you go, Illinois, right? Illinois.
Well, hey, my old home area, DC, the DC area. DC and Maryland, very strict gun control, and I still get some of the headlines I still get headlines out of there, and it's gotten crazy in the last couple of years since I've left. And in my defense, I
was not part of any shooting. I just want to say that for the record. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
That's true. In my defense of the use of the term y'all. Yes. Actually, I picked that up when I lived in North Carolina about 20 years ago. And, actually, I've lived the better over half of my life south of the Mason-Dixon line, to be honest with you. In D.C., it's not really the South, but it is south of the Mason-Dixon line.
Okay. Hey, fair enough. But D.C., were you living there at the time of the D.C. sniper and all that, too? I
wasn't. I was back in Pennsylvania at the time.
Okay.
But where I lived, I wasn't far. In fact, I was still going to I was in that area quite a bit at the time, but not during the whole sniper incident. But I remember it quite well.
Yeah, no, it was the craziest thing, and I remember the weirdest part of it was the reaction to when the guys were arrested, because everybody in the world swore up and down it had to be a white guy who did this, and it turned out it was not. According to law enforcement, allegedly, I should say, because even though he was convicted, Levoy Malvo and John Muhammad, he called himself, whatever.
Yeah. But and in recent years, I kind of revisited this story a little bit. It's been a long time, but that dude himself had a military history, and I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, it was military intelligence, not the kid, but the older of the two.
Yeah, well, see, that's the other funny part is you're not allowed to say this out loud usually, but I mean, there's a pretty good history of guys who make spectacular, shooting events happen. A lot of them do have some military connection. I'm not saying the majority or anything like that, but, going all the way back to the guy with the Texas clock tower deal in the 60s who said, please somebody examine my brain, and shot himself in the heart, right? That guy. Going all the way back to there, but I mean, a lot of guys, and look, we've talked about PTSD extensively on this show, and, if you don't treat people properly, could lead to things like this, just saying. But look, I'm not making excuses for any shooter, and we're not talking about shooters tonight either. Although we are talking about shots being fired, because I don't know about you guys, but let's get into this, see what it is that you've heard and what it is regarding the circumstance that's
gentlemen.
Yes,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I'm gonna stay connected but muted. I have to step out, but I will be back.
Okay, you do your thing, and I'll talk to regular Joe. So Joe, are you aware that there's something happening in the Middle East since October, and are you aware of the most recent developments? Let's just say.
No, vaguely at best. I have been very unplugged from current events, other than unless it's local.
I see. Okay, well, first of all, in October 7th, in fact, there was this invasion of people from Palestine crossing over into the territorial Israel and attacking it. And this was, the major terrorist attack, all that, and it sparked a serious response from Israel, where they have been pounding the hell out of, what is Palestine, Gaza mainly. For months now, this has been going on. A lot of people have died. There are all sorts of things happening. The MSM immediately responding with, of course, defend Israel. And now things are turning a bit. Seems like there's a lot of support Palestine sentimentality out there on the left, etc., because there are serious things happening here where a lot of civilians are being killed, being starved out, etc., etc., etc. But recent events have Iran getting involved, allegedly sending drone strikes into Israel directly. Now, Israel is going to respond, and there's been a lot of speculation about that. And as I'm just telling you, the very, very, very empty, no details version of this story. Do you have any thoughts related to this? Does this make you think anything, turn your mind to anything, or have you imagining what might come next?
I'm always worried when Persia is involved. Since ancient times is why I refer to it as, as ancient term. I'm always worried when they're involved. Also, when you hear of alliances in that region, that is cause for concern as well, and mainly to me because most of the world's people consider those lands holy, and people lose their shit over things that they consider holy and desecrate it worse than they ever could if they didn't, claim or feign to observe it.
Now, do you think that this is based, and I'm asking you this question open, honest, I'm not trying to load it too much, do you think that this is based only on the concept of biblical prophecy and the idea that, at some point, the apocalypse, the Armageddon, if you will, most scholars say it begins at Megiddo, but, some part of that world out there in the Middle East, that's where all of the mass destruction is supposed to begin, like when the world ends or when the rapture happens or when the great reckoning occurs on the planet, etc. You think it's all steeped in that Judeo-Christian teaching, or is there something more to it?
Not to me. To me, it's more crowd mentality than anything, and the crowd mentality is that land is holy. Mm-hmm. So whether prophecy says it is or says it isn't, if people think it's holy, they'll kill everybody because of it.
So you're looking at they may indeed be incited by what it is I'm citing, but that's not your thought process. Your thought process is because it is venerated as a holy area and something to be contended. There's a difference when you're fighting for land, you're fighting for money, you're fighting for oil, and you're actually fighting on God's side one way or another. There's a big difference. So when you think it's connected to the kingdom or to God or the gods or whatever, this kind of creates a different motivator, which is even more intense. Is that where you're going with this?
Absolutely. The more you can stoke people's emotion on it, and I think that even politics pales in comparison to religion. If you stoke their emotion on their core beliefs, then you'll burn the world.
Right. Well, at this point, though, in America anyway, it seems like emotionally there's no difference any longer where, there is a practical religion to this. You're either with the evil ones or you're against the evil ones, and that is the way religion lays it out, right? You're either on the side of God or you're not. You're either on the side of right or you're not, and there's no gray. There's just one side or the other. You speak in absolutes like a Sith, according to Star Wars, and that's just the way it is. Now, what's fascinating to me is that you bring up Persia, and of course, yes, geographically part of that area was Persia, but when you take a look at it, and you take a look at the ethnicity of people, and even those that want to claim that this is very, prophetic and everything else, the people that are in Iran, they're not speaking Arabic, and I don't think they're Arab by genealogical connection. They speak Farsi, I believe, or at least with
Farsi, largely Farsi. I think they speak other languages as well, but I think that Yeah, I think the lingua franca, as it were, is Farsi.
Yeah, it's Farsi. Like pretty much we speak English in the United States, but then again, you go to some places and you might have to speak Spanish. It's just the way it is. But generally speaking, you would say you speak English and American English in America. I think they speak Farsi over there. And ethnically, I don't believe that they're actually, Persians or Arabs or the ancestors of. Their ancestors are not the Persians, although geographically they're in the right area. Now, the bones of contention that lie in that area called Israel is yet another story, and some people in America feel directly connected to it because, after all, it is part of the biblical land. Jesus in Bethlehem and all that, which, of course, Bethlehem is in part of what we call Palestine today, and that's the way it is. So, of course...
I am back, gentlemen, by the way.
Excellent. So... The fascinating part to me is whether this is directly connected to your emotional reaction or if it's just you're concerned about the way the rest of the world is dealing with this. Because if your thoughts immediately turn to it, then you must be convinced that this is, like any war over there is a holy war of one type or another. And that is a different level than politics or, like I said, fighting over resources, etc. Although, like I said, nowadays it's difficult to tell the difference. So here's the thing. On my show, I'm not going to cover the opinions, really. Tonight we are, and I'm going to go to these guys and pick their brains a little bit and get at their opinions. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to give my opinions about what it is I want to see happen, what it is I think is wrong or right anymore when it comes to this Middle East thing. I'm going to have to start covering it, and I'm going to cover it as objectively as possible. Now, I started to look around at some of the interesting stories, as I always do. I'm always trying to keep informed. Happen to notice that as far as the murder rate is concerned in the U.S., a lot of the major U.S. cities, the homicide rate is actually falling. Believe it or not, despite the chaos and mayhem that's being reported, the actual homicide rates are falling in most major U.S. cities. Stuff like that, but also... I'm taking a look at the very strange stew that's going on over this conflict in the Middle East. Activist Post, for instance, let's see, is this today's story or was this yesterday? Yesterday, it looks like. Yesterday's story was Iran's strike against Israel a psyop, an opinion piece written by Janet Phelan over on Activist Post. And, of course, you have your ABC, NBC, CBS, and a whole alphabet soup trying to figure out what Israel is going to do, how they're going to respond to these drone attacks that were, sent by what they've been telling us now since October, and, of course, way previous to that, but they've been stressing it since October. The greatest sponsor internationally of terrorism on the planet, Iran, decided to directly send drones at Israel in response to what's happening. But the question stands from Phelan's article here, is this a psyop on one hand? Is this a psychological operation? Are we getting tuned up? Are we getting prepared for the idea that global conflict is a certainty? So with that, I'll go over to Captain Trips and ask you, what are your, how well read in are you on the recent events? And, what do they automatically make you think of, go to in your mind, etc.? And by the way, I talked to the Greek about this on a recent Rated Y episode. That's only available on Patreon if you go to the Greek Speak on Patreon. Not even available on my site, Ochelli and the Greek, anymore. It's only over there. But anyway, we did talk about this on a recent, I think it was 103 or 104 of Ochelli and the Greek Rated Y. But his take is decidedly different than most people's. I'm curious about your take on this thus far, Captain Trips. Do you have any sort of opinions, and how informed are you about what's happened so far?
I've been following it. I just as a little backstory. Hold on a second.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I want to get just the general idea of what somebody who I know is concerned with global events, international politics, et cetera, geopolitics.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm gonna step away. I'll be back in probably about 5 minutes, and I will give my opinion.
No
All
problem.
Right, so I'll be back.
I'll get to you when you get back. So, Joe, let's go back to you again then. the idea about the PSYOP, the psychological operation. Do you have any opinion as to whether you feel like we're sort of being prepared? Is this the pre-show, the pregame show for what's going to be a larger conflict? I mean, is this something that's all going to be timed for the 2024 selection, which now is only let's see, if we count it up, 7 months away. We're going to be dealing with this in November, right? So, I mean, what do you think? Yeah. Is this, a psychological operation to prepare us, or do you think this is, something that's just bound to have happened again? Kind of fits with the Greeks' predictions, though, for 2024 and 2025. If you think about it leading up to conflict going on over there, this time it'll actually be real. It does seem a lot more extreme. So any thoughts, even though you're not so well read in, Joe?
Is that actually where he stands on it? Is that this one bears fruit?
He didn't really go there just yet, but years ago, this is right about the target time he said things would begin. So,
well, whether I know what he bases his on, and I cannot, because clearly I have not done the work that he claims to have done, and I'm likely not to. However, again, if you just look at the people, look at the people of the region, how do they feel? How far is it spreading? What is the overall emotion? And if it's split around 50-50, like most things almost always are, probably going to be pretty bad. So I look at it more as mathematical and the way that people generally behave. And the way that people generally behave and mathematically, I feel like it could be the start of something worse. Yeah.
Totally understand, yeah. So let's take a look at a story printed in the Associated Press yesterday, just real fast while we wait for the captain to return, and I'll get his opinion on it, and I'll just read a little bit to you from a story published on April 15th, like I said, Associated Press. So let's see, Deir al-Balah, okay, Gaza Strip, AP, that's the byline headline there. Anyway, the Israeli military renewed warnings on Monday for Palestinians not to return to northern Gaza, a day after witnesses and medical officials said Israeli troops opened fire and killed 5 people among throngs of displaced residents trying to walk back to their homes in the devastated area. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were driven from the north after Israeli forces first launched their offensive there soon after Hamas's October 7 attack on southern Israel. In the months of fighting since, vast parts of the north have been flattened, including much of Gaza City. After months of Israeli restrictions on aid to the north, some 300,000 who remained there are on the brink of famine, according to the United Nations. Still, many Palestinians have wanted to go back, saying they are sick of the conditions they endured in displacement for months. Families have been crammed into tent camps, schools turned shelters, and homes of relatives throughout the south of the Gaza Strip. Some also fear remaining in Rafah, Gaza's southernmost town, as Israel says it plans to attack it eventually to root out Hamas. Late Monday, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant met with top officials to work on preparations for the Rafah invasion. His office said the international community, including the United States, have voiced strong objections to the planned offensive, saying it will endanger the estimated 1.4 million Palestinians sheltered in Rafah. Anyway, there's more in that story from the AP, which I'm going to post in the Ochelli chat room, along with maybe some other references to tonight's discussion. But anyway, that is part of the condition that's going on. And indeed, there have been, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, have clearly fired upon medical aid, have fired upon humanitarian aid, have fired upon civilians, unarmed, etc. And what they say is, look, it's all legitimate targets because the entire region is basically at war and seeking to destroy us. So it doesn't matter who we're shooting at. We're definitely aiming at the right targets. And indeed, there has been a bit of a pushback from the international community as of late. and the Biden administration is getting crap from certain, wings of certain parties, et cetera. They're even debating in Congress as to how to detach the Israeli aid from other projects so that they can continue to fund that. Because despite their objections to funding, our people or our allies or potential allies in other places, should I even bother to mention the name of the country that Russia is still committing a constant, what did they call it, limited military action? 2 years plus now, pounding the hell out of all of the country, which is, the capital is Kiev, right? Yeah, our friends there. Well, they want to separate that. No more sending U.S. money or anything else, even though we're not directly sending money. We're sending resources over there, and there's a whole game to that. But they want to increase the aid to Israel. We need to back Israel, according to one wing of the party, whereas the other wing, the one-party system here, with the other wing, showing some objections, and some other people might be saying that there might be crimes against humanity going on, et cetera, and all that, and maybe this isn't justified. But then again, a country attacked its own 9/11, as they said, on October 7 now. Are they justified, all that? I don't want to get into that discussion again, because it's tiresome and nobody changes their opinion or hears anything outside of their opinion about that. Let's forget about the opinion and think about where it's going to go from here. The wider conflict. We're hearing the Biden administration state repeatedly that this does need to be contained, and I'm willing to bet a lot of people on the planet are thinking, please don't let this completely spread and metastasize into all regions and eventually engulf a huge portion of the planet from this very small conflict that's going on, and create what? The Third World War? Is that what we're looking for? Well, some people want a civil war. Some people want the third global conflict, et cetera, et cetera. It is what it is. Like I said, it was what it was. Going to be what it's going to be. But anyway, I mean, is this how are you taking this, Joe? What do you think?
I think it's cause for concern for sure. I mean, there are people dying, obviously, in that region. And it seems like war always kills more civilians than it does soldiers. So everyone should be concerned with the breakout of a global state of warfare, which we've not been far from anyway, and I kind of see it as inevitable. I mean, a lot of people, they think that I'm pessimistic, and kind of am, but in a realistic way. You cannot let the smartest of your species split the atom and give that power to these apes that we call leaders. You can't do that. I mean, and expect a good outcome.
You know what I'm waiting for is the revision, the new argument about that Iran nuclear deal. If you remember, everybody criticized Obama for, releasing the sanctions and letting Iran take back some of its money that had been frozen and taken from them in order to have an agreement where they didn't have nukes. Well, I wonder how that would look if they had nukes, Iran, at the moment, or perhaps they do. I mean, if I were Iran, I'll tell you this, defensively, I would have been building a nuclear weapon no matter what I signed, because I happen to know that is one way to prevent yourself usually from being invaded.
Mutually assured destruction is the way it's been my entire life.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Reagan years when everybody was afraid of a nuclear bomb all the time. And, I lived pretty close to Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And so, it was always just a source of anxiety for all the kids in elementary school back in the 80s,
Right, and I'm wondering how long it's going to take before people start talking about the possibility of that sort of warfare being loosed from this conflict. Anyway, here's what I'm going to do, guys. I'm going to take a quick break and come back with Regular Joe and, of course, Captain Trips to keep discussing what is or is not happening and how things might metastasize in or out of the Middle East. As the Ochelli Effect continues here on a Tuesday, that is the first broadcast day of the week anymore on Ochelli.com. And things are going to change up real soon. Less opinion is going to happen, except on Friday nights where you call in with whatever you want. And a lot more reporting of just the facts is going to be what's going to be. Stick around.
WallStreetWindow.com. Gold, silver, the stock market. WallStreetWindow.com.
Perhaps you're invested deeply.
Perhaps you're not in deep enough. Maybe you're thinking about getting started. WallStreetWindow.com. Michael Swanson, the brilliant author of The War State, understood these trends professionally for many years, and now he gives you the benefit of his knowledge. WallStreetWindow.com. Go there now. Go there now. Go there now.
The War State by Michael Swanson explains the great national transformation that took place and put the Kennedy presidency in the context of the times and reveals never-before published information about the Cuban Missile Crisis. President Kennedy would not have been assassinated if he had been president 200 years ago. His assassination took place in the context of the Cold War and the rise of the national security state. Before World War II, the United States was a continental republic. In the decade that followed, it became an imperial superpower. Generals such as Curtis LeMay not only wanted to invade Cuba, but knew that there were short-range missiles on the island armed with nuclear warheads that they could not destroy because they were on mobile launchers. Their invasion could have led to a third world war, and they wanted to go to war anyway. The War State by Michael Swanson reveals why and will show you what President Kennedy was up against. For more information, thewarstate.com.
The views expressed by callers, co-hosts, or anyone else who happens to get on the air at Ochelli.com do not necessarily reflect the views of Ochelli.com or Chuck Ochelli, and we are not responsible for any stupidity which might ensue. Thank you.
Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, I'm interested in the truth about the JFK assassination.
Right. Well, what do you want to know?
Judy Baker's wild claim, Oswald girlfriend, she knew Ruby and Barry, cancer weapons. Really?
I imagine I could claim I have 4 wheels. It doesn't make me a wagon, but okay.
Oswald was on the kill team and trying to prevent the murder of John Kennedy. Come on now. Has a real expert on the JFK assassination looked into her claims?
Go to Amazon.com, enter Judith Baker in her own words. You'll get results for a digital copy of a book where Walt Brown utilizes her own words and the known evidence in the case to get at, well, a different perspective, let's say. You can get Judith Barry Baker in her own words from the author himself, signed if you request it by contacting Dr. Brown at KIASJFK@AOL.com. It's a fun book, and it actually dissects the many, many fantastic claims. Judith Barry Baker in her own words.
Thank you for all the great information.
This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, and you're listening to The Ochelli Effect at Ochelli.com.
Revelation through conversation.
Ochelli.com.
Normally that's my outro piece, but I played it accidentally, so what the hell, we're back. And we're live on a Tuesday, as I said earlier, but Captain Trips, who stepped away, I didn't get your take on this yet, and I do want to hear what you have to say, because look, this is geopolitical, this is religious, this is a matter of cultural understanding as we watch this conflict, and you're saying you're keeping track of it. So I'd like to get, just what your ideas about this are, and also along with that, what about the potential for what comes next? What are your thoughts on it? And I mean, do you take it as far as Joe does with, hey, look, you know what? You put crazy things in the hands of crazy people who might actually be in positions of leadership. Stuff could get out of hand real fast. And I wonder what anybody thinks about that nuclear deal with Iran now. Et cetera, et cetera. So your take on this, Trips, wherever you want to go, and disagree, agree, whatever, with the world. It's all you.
So my take, and I'm gonna refrain from the religious take on it, because I kind of led on to that. I led on to that on the break. I didn't realize we were off air.
Well, no, but for the record, you are a Christian guy, which I don't think Joe would call himself a Christian. I don't call myself a Christian, but you are Christian, and generally, most Christians in America, to my knowledge, are taught basically you either support Israel or you're not in support of God and His chosen people. So you're a bad guy if you don't support the nation state of Israel. That's what's being taught from the pulpits. But go ahead.
That's what's being, that comes out of, and that is not all of American Christianity. They are the loudest voices of it, and you certainly see pockets of that interspersed to any of the American Christian denominations. But that is typically more of an evangelical Pentecostal. A lot of Baptists will take that kind of really strong. And as I said on the break, in my reading of the scriptures and of the Gospels and of the Bible, and I've read the whole damn book multiple times, and I'm a regular reader of the Bible. But to me, it's a complete and total bastardization of the scriptures. If you want to go just from a biblical point of view, Christ Himself said, "Even I don't know the time or the date when I will return." Right. So. This all comes out of that crazy. His name just fell off my tongue in the 19th century. You have dispensationalism, and here we are. So from that perspective, and it's the funny thing about it is it's in my opinion, from a religious perspective, it's completely irrational on so many fronts, because you have the Christian Zionists who pretend to support Israel, but if you actually look under their beliefs, they don't act. They support Israel because they support what they claim to support is the rebuilding of the temple. But what they leave out of that is, in the eyes of these Christian Zionists, if the temple is rebuilt and Christ returns, unless in the evangelical and the Christian Zionist point of view, if the Jews don't convert to Christianity, these evangelical Christians think they're all going to hell anyway. So it's a really very twisted interpretation of the scripture. Right. And as far as the leadership in Israel right now, if anyone truly believes that Benjamin Netanyahu is a devout Jew, he's a secular Jew. Half of these people are frickin' atheists anyway. When you actually listen to them talk, they form coalitions with some of the more radical religious Jews, but even most of the Orthodox Jews, they don't support this crap. There was a really interesting discussion, and now the Tom Woods had on probably about 3 months ago, and I cannot remember the man's name, but he's an American pastor, and he just tears this apart. I'll find it. I have the clip. I'll send it to you. Excellent. Okay. But then there was another podcast I was listening to, and I can't remember who it was, but it was an interview with an Orthodox Jew who from his perspective and what he teaches and what he learns in Orthodox Judaism is that when the Israelites were kind of swept out and scattered to the wind, so to speak, after the destruction of the second destruction of the temple, they're not supposed to form a state there, according to the Orthodox Jews. They can be there, but to reform this state as they've created it is really against even the Orthodox Jews. Well, what's funny is, I'd have to pull that. I can't remember the exact. I can't remember the exact chapter verse.
If you find it, if you find a clip of it, by all means send it to me. I'll include it with the show notes. But let's take it out of the arena of religiosity. Sure. Because to me, that's what makes it so intense to some people. But let's just go with the geopolitical, right? And the majority of what I'm hearing from a lot of people is that, you either have to stand on one of two sides. Either you're with America's ally Israel, or you're one of these radical leftists who appreciates the terrorists. And that's pretty much it. And free Palestine and stand with Palestine, and you know what? Push Israel into the sea. all of that, okay, from the what is it, from the river to the ocean, whatever it is. The point is you got to stand on one side or the other because it is the heated geopolitical reality, right? So forget religiosity. Forget about whose religion is anybody. By the way, not all Palestinians are Muslim, although they're categorized that way. And oh, by the way, since they haven't had an election since 2007, and the majority of people that live there are either underage or were not eligible to vote back then, you got to imagine the majority of residents who were there at the beginning of this conflict didn't elect Hamas, even though Hamas was elected into office basically there in Palestine, right? Okay, but forget about all that. What about how this could spread, metastasize, and, become the brush fire that lights up that whole region, which could draw in a whole lot of other people? This could become the thing that...
Aging Archduke Ferdinand?
Something like that, right? I mean, yeah. Look, it's not Yugoslavia, but it's more intense in people's minds because,
yep,
some people are spoiling for it. Much like the whole "let's go for a civil war" here in America, they want it. I think they want it until they realize what the reality of that is. But anyway, what about that end of it? What do you think of that? I mean, are we looking at something that's really going to kick off something major here? Because, I mean, I did not expect Iran to send in drones. Good.
I think we could potentially run into something. Things are very unstable, and I think this is such a tinderbox. I think everything has been a tinderbox. This is, just one more nail in the coffin. And you're gonna. And I'm sure, Jimmy James, I'm sure if you're listening, you can call me all the names you want. And you all know I really have no affection for the current presidential administration. But if some of the stuff I hear coming out is accurate, I'm starting to think that at least somewhere in this Biden administration, whether it's him or someone, there seem to be some cooler heads and some more rational voices that are being listened to. Mm-hmm. It appears to me, I think the whole, first of all, let's just cut through the crap. If high level American military officers were sitting in the American embassy in Germany and frickin' Spain launched a cruise missile and killed them, I think we would have responded far more irrationally than the Iranians did. So let's just call that what it is. As far as I'm concerned, I don't agree with any of it. I'm not on anyone's side. But let's be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. They fired a missile into a third country, into this country's consulate, killing high-level military officials. You don't expect some type of a response? So, let's just the whole unprovoked and it's unprecedented and blah, blah, blah. Give me a frickin' break. Because I think we would have turned half of Europe into ground glass if it was if it was our embassy. The response is kind of interesting, and it seems like, from what I can tell, there's two schools of thought. One, that it was, a complete failure, but two, the other one, I guess there's three, because I did read that piece that you were referring to earlier, where someone was saying, was this a psyop? Mm-hmm. Which, you know what? Who knows? I'm at that point now. Was it? I don't know. What was the CIA director that was on video saying that we'll know our program is a success when the American public doesn't believe anything?
Might have been Colby, but yeah, go ahead.
One other thing. I think the doomsday clock is itching ever so closer to midnight. I don't think that the people that are in charge in Israel are sane. I really don't. I don't know what they hope to accomplish, because if you just look at this 6-month-long military campaign, if they're really worried about the survival of Israel, they're not doing themselves any favors. I mean, for the first time in my life, it seems like the popular opinion in this country is, at the very least, we're not supporting Israel, but you're hearing a lot more voices of people who are calling this out. I mean, even in some of the more establishment media figures, I've heard make comments. Hell, I got was listening to, yes, every once in a while I check out AJ just to see what he's saying. And I was listening to, he was calling it out. So I really think they overplayed their hand. And that's not to say that I agree with the attack on October 7th, because I don't. I mean, there's too many innocent people are dying. I don't give a rat's snot what religion you profess or don't profess.
Well, that's the horror of it, right? And this is my objection to what's going on in Ukraine, which is that, look, I guarantee there's plenty of innocent people that are dying. Okay, well, they got to get rid of the Nazis. Yeah. Okay, look, even if you're correct about all that, one guarantee that I have here is that in a military action where there is a lot of live fire, guess what? A whole lot of innocent people who were not in military uniforms, who didn't sign up, who were not the intended targets, are going to die. If they don't die directly by being shot or bombed, they're going to die as a result of the disruption of the infrastructure, etc. It's just the way it is, and it's a guarantee when you engage in any conventional or even semi-conventional warfare, which, by the way, the quote is from William Casey. I said Colby, but I meant Casey. And I went and got it just to make sure I had it straight. And it is, we'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. And that was William Casey. And I think it was 81 he said it.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, so that's correct. I thought Colby for a minute, but no, Colby's the guy who drowned on it fishing by himself, I think. Anyway, either way, because Colby said some stuff he shouldn't have too, but Casey is the one who said that. Anyway, just being specific about it. Yeah, look, there's a lot to this. And by the way, are we not familiar with the idea that Iran, just like they were telling us after post-October 7, they're the big nation state sponsoring terrorism, right? We heard that throughout the entire W administration. Mm-hmm. They were part of the axis of evil. They were exactly who was going to be gone after. They were part of the list that we never quite got to militarily, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think there's a lot of there was a lot of happy smiles on people like Lindsey Graham and Nikki Haley and some of the other creatures that have been pulling for this for so long. Yeah, and in reference to your earlier comment, you're absolutely right. The general population of any country is not going to benefit from a war, and I truly hope that, if the statements that Iran has issued since all this was, we can consider this done, leave it alone. I hope that there are people within the American administration that are able to implant this, but it doesn't really seem like the people running Israel right now really care what the Americans have to say at this point.
Well, I don't think they care what anybody has to say, because despite the fact that the international community has complained about some of the stuff that I pointed out earlier, certain people going trying to get food relief and things like that, getting gunned down or bombed. That was pointed out, by other countries in other news feeds, not in America, but it has been shown to have happened. People complained about that, and Israel basically said, look, it's war, it is what it is, and we're going to keep doing what we're doing. It's just been the way it is. When they said, well, you're bombing too many hospitals, they say, well, they're legitimate targets because they're housing terrorists. The tunnel networks, we haven't heard about the tunnel networks anymore, have we?
No,
in the past many months.
That's gone away.
That's all gone, it seems like.
That has gone away.
Did they destroy them all? Do you think they I don't know. If they're using that to attack me, I'm thinking what you do is you throw some dynamite down there and render them useless, and that's the end of that. Maybe they did that, and therefore it's no longer a factor. I don't know. It's difficult, and that's the other thing here. As much as it seems like we're being told what's going on the ground there, we're not. Because how much news is getting out of Palestine directly? Everybody who reports, even if you see these reporters, I'm on the scene here, they're always in Israel. They're dependent upon IDF spokespeople. So you're literally getting only one side of it. I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm just pointing out a fact here that you're only receiving in the media reports from the IDF side of things. I mean, look, if you want to say that Hamas is their literal opponent, are Hamas spokespeople getting out there? I've seen statements from Hamas in print, but I haven't seen, a person go out and go, hi, I'm the guy from Hamas. Here's what's happening on our side. That didn't happen. So we're only getting one side of it, and it's being filtered. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and then you have the other things that are painfully obvious, that Hamas was a creation on some level and was funded on some level by the government of Israel. I mean, that's no longer even an arguable fact. And, it seems like they know where Hamas leadership is. The leadership, it seems like the actual leadership of Hamas is not in Israel, and it's not in Gaza. I think it's in Qatar is where most of these people are. So we can launch missiles into Syria to blow up the Iranian consulate. But you mean to tell me that the vaunted Mossad couldn't knock these people off if that's what they were really trying to do? Or the CIA?
Well, that's the other weird thing.
That's what I'm saying. It's very weird.
Well, that's the other weird thing because, look, effectively, and I pointed this out a long time ago when, Trump changed the way things are being done in Syria, and by the way, Biden has not adjusted it, where we put the American military into a position of just you're going to guard these oil fields over here, and you're no longer going to be involved in Syria as far as, battling what's going on there. They stepped aside and let the Russians go in and implement their military program, and that's the way it's been until now when Israel turns around and bombs that embassy, right? So it's a weird thing going on. I mean, it seems like they might have endangered some Russian troops unless they went and called Putin and said, hey, look, your guys might want to duck and cover because we're going to send in some munitions into an area where your military is active. Unless I'm mistaken and there's no activity going on in Syria with the Russians any longer.
I haven't heard much. I mean, they're clearly still there. But I think what you said is absolutely true. There had to have been coordination or at least communication between Russia and the United States because the risk of U.S. troops and Russian troops encountering each other was ridiculously high, and it never happened. I think there was one or two, maybe close encounters with aircraft or something like that. Where they were within range of each other.
Well, and one airfield, one airfield ended up with some pockmarks on it that they showed on the news, and that was the big deal right before. Right. And like I said, Trump adjusted that and pulled U.S. troops out of active engagements in Syria. I mean, we weren't seeing a high body count come out of there. Either on our side or the alleged enemy anyway, but there was constant skirmishes going on, and they seemed to move them. And I remember that announcement. It was like, now they're just going to guard the oil fields over here in this one region of the country, and that's what the U.S. troops' jobs are going to be. And then there hasn't been a peep since. And the Russians were still there, but that was right after we had accidentally, allegedly, bombed a Russian airfield. Where, a couple of explosives landed on the airstrip. And like I said, they showed us, a satellite photograph of this airfield with some pockmarks on it from the bombs. And that was it. So all I'm saying is there's a lot to be considered, and CENTCOM is definitely involved in all this. The Biden administration seems to be asking for, like you said, you don't know if it's Joe himself. I doubt it, but somebody who's hired over there is saying, look, why don't you guys show some restraint? And thus far, despite the hullabaloo, it actually hasn't been a real extreme reaction. Even the drone strikes that have gone. Now, the Israelis have kind of rattled the saber a bit and said, we are going to respond big to this, right? But obviously the Iranians have said, hey, we had to respond to you. And here we go with a tit for tat, which eventually I think people will forget who fired the first shots in the first place if it goes far enough.
Yes.
And that's just a reality. This isn't about me rooting for one side or the other. I'm saying this is the mess that it becomes. In a big giant barroom brawl, a lot of people forget who threw the first punch. because it just becomes chaos for a bit, no matter how well you try to control it. And that's the way it happens in war as well, right? People have a memory about the first shot fired or whatever, but it's usually not accurate. I mean, even in American history, we called this thing the Boston Massacre or whatever, right? And one guy died, who was shot during the Boston Massacre. Crispus Attucks, I think, was killed, right? Anyway,
I think so, yes.
Yeah, so, and I'm just citing the weirdness of something that is later remembered as a massacre. Well, I guess if one person can be massacred, sure. But as far as I know, one guy got shot during a civil unrest, and they call it a Boston Massacre. Anyway, all I'm saying is that history records it one way, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the way it got started. And this could be the start of something big, or it could be just a side issue and meant to just prep us for the next big thing that happens. And in that way, is it a psyop? So, okay, lots of questions will remain as we'll try and follow this. But how well are we going to be able to follow it is my other question. And I want to ask Joe this real fast and then probably close out with you, Trips. But, Joe, you're still with us, right, Joe? Have we put you to sleep?
Yeah, I'm still here. Sure.
So
I'm still here.
So here's the thing, Joe. Even if you wanted to get well read in on this, right, and you wanted to be completely informed minute by minute, and, you decided, I mean, you're not going to tune into one of the American news networks for that. But let's just say you wanted to be well informed about what was going on here. Keep your eye on it, because indeed there are way too many people that are waiting for Jesus to return over there at the landing pad, or that think this is a holy war that is just and whatever. Regardless of other people's, ideas about how intense this needs to get to be, you might want to be informed about it. What are the chances that you could be, even if you tried, Joe, actually be informed about this? I mean, as I said, thus far, we're only treated to what the IDF has to say. But what do you think about that? Could you even potentially get well read in and know what's actually happening minute by minute or day by day or week by week even during what's happening in the Middle East at the moment?
Seems to me that there's only one thing that you really need to watch to determine how serious the situation is, and that is Netanyahu in Israel, or is he out of the country? If he's in the country, probably not going to be too bad yet. If he's out of the country, probably going to be pretty nasty.
Fair enough.
Very good thought.
Very good point. And, of course, some people would say, well, that's the point at which they bring in the, they will bring in the clone, the replacement, the body double, and the guy will still seem to be there, but the real Netanyahu will be out of there. I'll leave that for somebody else's show, but go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say the other very interesting thing that didn't happen. Now, whether it didn't happen because Iran's retaliation occurred on a Saturday, there wasn't too much of a issue with the markets and with oil. Oil went up, but you would have thought, and I think someone, I can't remember who pointed this out. It wasn't me who thought this, but I said, yeah, that actually makes sense. That had this happened during the week, when the stock market was open and all the trading markets were open, economically, you would have probably had an extremely big shakeup. But it didn't happen. Now, is that because it happened on a Saturday? There wasn't an immediate response by Israel, so by Monday or Sunday night over here, when the market started to open, people were a little calmer. But what Joe said, I totally agree with. But that's the other thing I'm watching, and it's tough to sort out what we're seeing, because hell, the price of gold, we're hovering close to $2,500 an ounce.
Right.
With all that said, where is BB right now? I'm sorry to interrupt, but that made me realize I don't know where he is.
See, there's another point.
There was, I heard there was one story on Saturday I saw, where someone was tracking, on one of the flight tracking websites, I don't know if it was the equivalent of the U.S. Air Force One, but supposedly it was an Israeli Israeli government aircraft that supposedly had Netanyahu in it, which I thought was interesting. But then that never went anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's, and you mentioned the other thing, and this, to think that this is actually what's going on would be quite a stretch. But given the coordination we saw, not to bring up the scamdemic thing, but given the coordination we saw with all the countries around the world, when everybody in lockstep, with the exception of Sweden and a couple of U.S. states, just went along lock, stock, and barrel with it, it almost makes you wonder: could this really be a psyop? Because let's be honest, I don't think the Israeli government really gives two shits about the Israelis, let alone the Palestinians. And quite frankly, I don't think the Iranian government gives two shits about the Iranian people. So for governments to use their populations as pawns in a larger game, to me, isn't out of the question. Now, I don't have evidence for that, except, I obviously I closely follow the COVID story and all that's been coming out with that. And you have more and more people speaking out now. You just had that doctor from Japan the end of last week come out with a big thing about how the increased cancer rates, and saying that this mRNA stuff is not safe. It has to be pulled off the market.
Right.
Then, even in this country, like them or not, there's only been a couple of people in Congress that have been doing anything. And the two big ones were Rand Paul and Ron Johnson from Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And Rand Paul seems to be uncovering quite a bit of interesting stuff. So I don't know. I don't think that's what's going on. I don't think this is some huge, large psyop. But I can't completely rule it out at this point either.
Well, there you have it. And look, you can look to even the British national health people starting to ask questions. It's getting weird out there regarding the aftermath of the great vaccination, right, of the nations.
Yes, I think there's a lot of buyer's remorse here on all levels.
Seems to be some buyer's remorse, but here's the key, and you mentioned it, and I'm going to tell you this. That all hell is about to break loose in the Middle East. You know how you know it for certainty is when your gas price jumps an unreasonable level overnight. Yeah. And when it does that for a solid week, and it seems like nothing big is happening in the news, it's about to. And you brought it up, and I agree with you, and that's the truth of it. And I'm just giving you a barometer, not an opinion. Yeah. I'm not rooting for a side, but that's the way it is, and that's the way we're going to end this one tonight on the Ochelli Effect.
Going to Chuck Ochelli.
When you hear Chuck Ochelli, you know it's Chuck Ochelli.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely, man to man. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
The Ochelli Effect.
The Ochelli.com radio network.
The views expressed by callers, co-hosts, or anyone else who happens to get on the air at Ochelli.com do not necessarily reflect the views of Ochelli.com or Chuck Ochelli, and we are not responsible for any stupidity which might ensue. Thank you.
Nuclear holocaust. You know what uranium is, right? This thing called nuclear weapons and other things, like lots of, you know what uranium is, right? Bad things. Things are done with uranium, including some bad things. Nuclear holocaust. You know what uranium is, right? I've been briefed. Nuclear holocaust. Nuclear holocaust. You know what uranium is, right? This thing called nuclear weapons and other things, like lots of, you know what uranium is, right? Bad things. Things are done with uranium, including some bad things. Nuclear holocaust. Nuclear holocaust. Nuclear holocaust. Nuclear holocaust. Nuclear holocaust.
Ochelli.com. Do you like history? Real history that you were never taught in schools? Why? The Vietnam War, nuclear bombs and nation building in Southeast Asia by author Mike Swanson with new documentation never seen before that'll open your eyes to events that led up to this. Why? The Vietnam War, nuclear bombs and nation building in Southeast Asia, 1945 through 1961. Get your copy today at Amazon.com. Why? The Vietnam War by author Mike Swanson.
Uncle, do you remember that time when Benjamin Fulford said that an Asian secret society was going to dispatch ninjas to take down the Illuminati?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, in the cartoon.
Yeah, did that ever work out too good?
No.
It didn't, did it?
Didn't work.
But here on Ochelli.com radio network, things work out a bit better, don't they?
Much better. It's clearer in understanding about the programs. The programs are much clearer. Getting live people into it. They really have a good conversation going.
Much better.
Much better scene.
I say forget Benjamin Fulford and his ninjas and listen to the Ochelli.com radio network.
I agree. It's straight to the point.
Straight talk.
And I like that idea.
Ochelli.com.
In Denial, Secret Wars with Airstrikes and Tanks by Larry Hancock. Secret wars became a staple of U.S. covert operations and are still happening today. Larry Hancock's book, In Denial, rips the cover off many of them. Using new files, it exposes things about the Bay of Pigs that no one has ever written about before. It shows why it really failed and why the United States did not learn from it. It also shows why other countries today are doing secret operations with more success. This is the book that puts what some want to deny into the light. In Denial, Secret Wars with Airstrikes and Tanks. Larry Hancock. For more information, go to larry-hancock.com. Pick up your copy of In Denial at Amazon.com in digital or physical form.
Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, I'm interested in the truth about the JFK assassination.
Right. Well, what do you want to know?
Judy Baker's wild claim, Oswald girlfriend, she knew Ruby and Barry, cancer weapons. Really?
I imagine I could claim I have 4 wheels. It doesn't make me a wagon, but okay.
Oswald was on the kill team and trying to prevent the murder of John Kennedy. Come on now. Has a real expert on the JFK assassination looked into her claim?
Go to Amazon.com, enter Judith Baker in her own words. You'll get results for a digital copy of a book where Walt Brown utilizes her own words and the known evidence in the case to get at, well, a different perspective, let's say. You can get Judith Barry Baker in her own words from the author himself, signed if you request it by contacting Dr. Brown at KIASJFK@AOL.com. It's a fun book and it actually dissects the many, many fantastic claims. Judith Barry Baker in her own words.
Thank you for all the great information.